can move wherever you want. All right. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, and welcome to today's event, Global Cooperation to Deliver Scalable Solutions for Methane Mitigation. My name is Nate Holtman, and I am the director of the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland. And I'm very excited to be here today to open the session and give a couple of opening comments. It's been an extraordinary year for action on methane, and I know that many of you and many people had been working on methane diligently well before last year. But I do think that at COP26 in Glasgow, we really saw a change in the way methane was being viewed both internationally, and I think that really refracted down into the national and subnational levels. So it's actually a really exciting time to be thinking about methane, how we globally can approach and address this critical and very potent greenhouse gas, which will likely, if we can make progress quickly on it, help us reduce our overall peak warming in the 2030s, 40s, and up to 2050, and help keep that 1.5 goal within reach. So I'm extraordinarily excited about all the work that has been happening, including all the work that you've been doing around methane. As I'm sure we've all remember, 1 year ago at COP26, the Global Methane Pledge was launched with well over 100 countries agreeing to a collective target of 30% reductions by 2030. Also at COP26, the U.S. and China announced the U.S.-China Joint Glasgow Declaration on Enhancing Climate Action in the 2020s, which called out in particular the potential for collaborations such as this one on methane to enhance understanding and to support more effective climate action, including on methane. I had the privilege of being on Secretary Kerry's team last year to help shepherd that agreement forward. And I'm heartened to see that over the past year, our broader research and subnational community, including that linked up here in the event today, you'll hear more from the experts, has responded so constructively with so many collaborative partnerships leading to new actions and new pathways to success on overall methane mitigation. As one of many examples, in fact, today our center is releasing the most comprehensive report to date, providing new in-depth look at opportunities and challenges for methane mitigation between the U.S. and China. And as I know, probably you all have been following, the President Xi and President Biden met yesterday at the G20, and there may well be some, I hope, some follow-on to that here at the COP. But also these collaborative activities and research from all levels of society, I think we're finding can improve outcomes. And so that can be in the United States, it can be in other countries, and in fact, I do also know that there's been a recent effort from both the U.S. and Bloomberg Philanthropies to launch a subnational methane, waste sector methane project called Scale, which we'll also be involved in some way. I'm also hopeful that as the world works this week toward a good global outcome at COP27, it'll be extraordinarily helpful, I think, for our negotiators, for our leaders to have collaborations such as this one in support of their work to raise their ambition and to deliver higher levels of implementation over the course of the next few years. Today you're going to hear from a number of experts and practitioners from all levels of society on this very timely and significant topic. They will share creative thinking to bridge sectors, elevate community voices, and ensure just and equitable solutions. They'll talk about how to encourage major emitters to collaborate on global mitigation and drive investment to support communities who have the willpower but may lack the resources to implement solutions. We will first hear from Elen Mirovic, who leads the Climate Change Advisory Services team at IDB Invest. She is responsible for developing innovative strategies and implementing solutions to reduce the impact of climate change that include governments and companies of various sectors in countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. She has extensive experience in creating favorable conditions for environmentally friendly investments and leveraging international climate funds to help channel private investment to the region. So please join me in welcoming Elen for her remarks.
Thank you so much for inviting IDB Invest to be part of this session. I think that it was important for me to start first telling you who IDB Invest is, what do we do, and how we work in Latin America and the Caribbean, to then go deeper into the methane, specifically the numbers and how we're working with companies in the region. So IDB Invest is the private sector arm of the IDB Group. The IDB Group is the multilateral development bank that works with Latin America and the Caribbean. And so within IDB Invest, we work with companies and private banks and funds to support investments that are related, in the case of climate change, to increase ambition and to increase the decarbonization and resiliency pathways of companies. So we have been talking and thinking about methane, and we are going to probably sign soon to be part of the Methane Pledge and try to support companies and countries in the Latin American region. And why? We know that there's 2% or less of climate finance that is destined to methane. And if we want to reach the 1.5 degrees, we need to increase this number tenfold. So it's quite a lot of investment that we need to drive toward methane. We know, if we look at the major sectors that contribute to the methane, we have waste management that probably it is estimated that we need $44 billion to go and to be channeled to this sector, and we only see $7 billion right now. Or in Afolu, we have right now an estimation that we would need $43 billion to channel to this sector, and we only see $4 billion. With the fossil fuel industry, we are estimating, or there's estimations that we would need $31 billion to abate methane in this sector, and we only see $100 million. So definitely there is a lack of resources, and I think the Methane Pledge, it would put a spotlight on this sector, which is very important to increase investment. Now, in terms of the value for money in this regard, when we compare it with other sectors that are low emission or help the low carbon trajectory of the countries, we know that methane could reduce potentially, if we work on methane, 3 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. And in the transport sector, we see that any work on low carbon transportation could reduce 4 gigatons of CO2 emissions by 2030. Now, the transport sector receives around $137.3 billion per year, while the methane receives only $11 billion. So again, it's another way of saying that we still need to invest a lot on methane. And worldwide, we see that there's a lot of investment from private sector, and we also see there are a lot of investments in East Asia and the Pacific region. And one of the sectors that you see that it could have a lot of potential is, of course, fossil fuels. Now, what's the specific examples of Latin America and the Caribbean? In Latin America and the Caribbean, the truth is that we have a cleaner energy matrix, so it's not that we shouldn't invest necessarily on fossil fuel efficiencies, but still, that's not the main driver. The main driver is agribusiness, livestock and rice, and also waste management. Now, in terms of an MDB, and I do have to say that here we find a tension to work on methane, especially if we look at this narrative that maybe fossil fuel industry could be an option. As MDBs, as you know, we have committed to 100% Paris alignment from 2023 onward. And actually, the Treasury guidelines to support transactions on MDBs basically prevent us from working on the fossil fuel industry at all. So we cannot reduce methane from the fossil fuel industry, at least working with MDB resources. So we have to focus on livestock, in rice, and waste management. But what are the first steps? We haven't measured specifically, at least within the MDBs, how much of our investment in emission reductions go to methane. So one of the first steps that we're taking is within our GHG system is to calculate how much of it has to do with methane to be able to estimate how much money we should channel to these sectors. The other point that we're doing is working with companies, providing them advisory services to know how they can establish a decarbonization pathway that includes reduction on methane emissions. And then to look at potential technologies that could reduce methane in those sectors. And that goes, again, for livestock, rice, and waste. And what would be my end goal? My end goal is that if we have the data, and I was glad to hear about the project that you're launching, because I think it could help us as well. If we have the data, then we can start structuring new financing instruments to work with the private sector. For example, SLBs, so sustainability-linked bonds or sustainability-linked loans that are linked to a KPI of reducing methane. That would be our aim, but for that we need the data. And that's what we're missing right now. So part of the work program that we have with the State Department right now is to establish knowledge products, data generation specifically for the Latin America and the Caribbean region. And the last point that I wanted to make is that this data is important for us when we engage with clients. We have been engaging with clients, and when we talk about methane, they don't necessarily understand the potential impact. We have worked with or been engaging with dairy companies that they see this very far away from their reality, their regional reality. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today to see what lessons I can take and bring to the region when we're talking with clients, because definitely this is the way that we can showcase what the real impact is when we talk about methane. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helen and Nate, for the very thoughtful remarks. My name is Rina Tsui. Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be the moderator for this session. I'm also from the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability. So now I would like to welcome all the panelists to the stage. First, we have Desmond Alguna, co-founder of Green Africa Youth Organization and a program manager, Gaia Africa. Then Aaron Pedraza, co-chair Energy Working Group, Philippine Movement for Climate Justice, the Secretary General in Sri Lankas. And last but not least, we have Gabriel Quintana, analyst at InnoFlora. Please. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Very much look forward to the discussion. So I think I want to start by doing some bigger picture context. I think we all know the world still fighting really hard to address the climate crisis, trying to keep 1.5 degree temperature goal within reach. In this context, working together is very important. Collaboratively, we can understand what are the opportunities and how we can apply it creatively to together to address those challenges. So I think I want to learn from all of you in your experience, in your own capacities. What do you see as the key opportunity for engaging collaboratively bottom up to reduce methane emissions? I think I'll start with Desmond, and we can pass around.
Thank you, Rina. I think that when it comes to this sector, the opportunities are abound, especially with every new sector, because we haven't explored much with methane. So I think there's just so much to explore. And I think that it relies on local action, and local action here, I'm talking about the main heroes who are, for example, local communities, waste pickers, informal sector, who are working in the various countries. Now, when you look at where do we intersect, or where do we look for the gaps where we can fill, and those become the opportunities for us to collaborate, we would see that there are a lot of these groups that are still struggling with awareness as far as methane is concerned. How do they mainstream their work in a way that it reflects the actual impact it is doing in methane? That's a place that you talk of knowledge opportunity for sharing knowledge or collaborating as far as technical expertise is concerned. The other thing is also, of course, that we have a lot of different groups. For me, speaking for Africa, we have different groups that are working in different countries, and they are not necessarily, some of them are not necessarily working together except for the groups that organizations like Gaia is mobilizing, and then giving them a central point to be able to understand who is where and what does that person need. So I think as far as collaboration is concerned, we can also think around how do we synchronize the work of different groups in different countries, but also across regions to be able to collaborate. And then, of course, if I can even go further, I think resources in general, as far as finance is concerned, is another opportunity for us to collaborate, right? So I feel that this sector is fairly new. We've been acting on it, but it has never been framed that much enough. It has never gotten so much attention, and so that it in itself gives us the opportunity for us to explore the various ways that we can collaborate. Thank you.
Hello. Yes. On the opportunities, I think we are actually riding on the back of the gains of the anti-coal movement, and that it has been able to push back much of the expansion, although of course a lot of challenge remains, and that many communities are still facing the threat of coal expansion in their jurisdiction. But we've been able to see the scaling down in terms of, for instance, the MDB support, and this has been expressed in recent pronouncement. For instance, the World Bank, it has a green energy approach, which professes to no longer support coal and even include intermediated finance or through indirect financing financial intermediaries, and using that as a platform to argue further that if you can promise and pledge not and to no longer support coal, you can do that to other fossil fuels, including, for instance, fossil gas, which has been pinpointed as a huge emitter of methane. And another opportunity, of course, is the availability now of the knowledge as mentioned by our colleague from Africa. Information, for instance, a year ago published saying that 120 million tons of methane from the fossil fuel industry. That is why you have the Glasgow Pledge, for instance, or the commitment to reduce 30% of that by 2030. This information points us to the direction of the climate science, that there is no longer space for such expansion in fossil fuel expansion and then methane expansion because of the window for action. And this should propel not just MDBs, but countries, especially the global north, to rethink. They may no longer be supporting fossil gas projects, for instance, in their jurisdiction, but they are definitely supporting projects in the global south, whether through public finance coming in through the multilateral development banks or directly through their corporations. And I agree with that point that another opportunity is the broad network of fossil fuel network that has been mounted in the recent years. And then we've made significant strides, and we have now movement across, even faith-based denominations. You have the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, for instance. That was not heard of in the last 10 years. And that started because of Laudato Si. And we bank on these successes and these gains to further our anti-fossil fuel campaign. And the last thing I think would be looking at renewable energy as an alternative. And we have more information now as to its viability. It used to be just a slogan, we go for RE. Now we actually have actual science, actual experience on the ground. Communities pointing us towards the direction that they can do it. And that is an argument against methane expansion, against fossil fuel expansion. I think these are some of the collaborative spaces that we can explore and to push our specific campaigns and goals. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree of all I have been said, and representing the agriculture sector here, it's a pleasure to talk about this because why methane, right? Because methane is a short-lived gas with almost 12 years on the atmosphere, and his global warming potential is bigger than other gases, 28 times more than other gases like carbon dioxide. So as being a short-lived gas, and if you go above warming potential, if we reduce methane quickly, we can keep on track of the Paris Agreement to keep our temperature 1.5 Celsius, reach that at last this target. So in agriculture sector, cooperating with all the other sectors also, we have the opportunity to not just reduce methane. I'm not even talking about the possibility to removal carbon dioxide from the atmosphere like NBS solutions. I'm here to talk about reduction of methane, increasing, keeping the higher productivity, keeping the demand being attended by the agriculture sector, like meat, dairy, and other biofuels, for example, fiber, other products for agriculture sector that we must have attend the demand, and we can do it reducing methane at the same time. So, and it's cheap compared to the other sectors because we know what are the best practice. We know how to implement a toolkit that can promote low carbon agriculture, for example, and keep on the track to reduce methane on this sector also. I guess it's as said here before, it's a sector that has the biggest potential to reduce quickly methane and start this movement to all of sectors, like the industry, waste, other countries, for example, to start a movement to ambitions to try to reduce methane, especially on this context of global methane pledge, where we have less than 8 years to accomplish that target. So it's on the door. We have to, it's on the right on the corner. We have to make all effort possible to keep this target on our site, or we're gonna lose it. And it's a big opportunity that is ahead that we cannot let escape in all sectors also.
Thank you all. I think it's really amazing to hear, all the expertise across 3 sectors. Covers the waste and also the energy part and the agriculture part across different country contexts. I think it's a really nice coverage of all the major areas. I think I've heard the keywords from all of your comments about information sharing, like important about science, and also from the angle about how the benefits to the broader society is not just about the transition, emission reduction, but really when we work with local community, we have to think about the benefits to the broader development. So I think I want to ask about what do you think the role of the science community or the research community and to help push this agenda, thinking about the broader the benefits about also the climate goal and from the research community, how we can work together and develop a more helpful information to support action.
So the group of people that I work with are mainly local communities who are working in various countries. So I'll give you an example. In Ghana, we mobilize about 380 waste pickers who are the main actors supporting the segregation at source and also the recovery of all different kinds of waste. And they are still the group that's helping us to produce about 2,000 bags of compost fertilizer every month, supporting our farmers to have access to fertilizer and rejuvenate the soil biodiversity. Now, these group of informal waste workers who are key actors and diverting waste from the landfill and supporting the act on or the fight against methane gas emission do not have the capacity to sort of research and provide scientific data to highlight the issue. And that's where research comes in. That's where the researchers and the scientists comes in, right? So we have actors on the one hand who may not have the skill to put the spotlight on methane gas or the actions they are undertaking, but they are doing really great. But then we have the scientists who are also there and can bring a lot of attention to the issue, can be able to direct finance, can be able to dissect the issue and tell what aspect deserves to be financed first and what aspect deserves to follow. And I think that's where the researchers comes in, the issue of putting spotlight on methane gas action at local level. And then the second is the issue of directing finance to the field. And then the other thing is also related to the inter-regional work that, for example, we are doing in Africa. So we have, we're doing similar work in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and few other African countries. We are supporting governments to produce policy documents or zero waste practice documents. For example, last year we produced a zero waste strategy in Ghana. We produced a zero waste guide in Nigeria. And these are things we are doing with city officials. We are doing it with municipalities, right? So we are supporting government to transition into sound waste management, but also to create job opportunities for indigents. Now, some of these governments, again, are not in the right do not have the right capacity to be able to attract global attention or produce reliable data based on the work that they are doing. However, the work that they are doing is something that is worth highlighting, and it's something that we can be able to frame in the context of climate action and be able to tell if we are acting at this rate today, where do we go next time? And where are the synergies for us to do cross-regional work? And that's where I think the scientist work comes in. I think that's where the researchers could actually come in. Thank you.
Yes, I do agree that because of the challenges already being confronted by host communities, and my emphasis really is on energy work because that's where we focus, apart from today being an energy day at the COP, as declared by different climate groups, is that because of the work that they're already doing to stop the expansion of fossil fuel projects, the time being devoted there is really consuming the energy and the effort, such that any contribution from other sectors of society, significantly and more importantly from the scientific community, would definitely boost the campaign being done. And the unfortunate side is I do believe that there's already a lot of scientific findings on the impacts, for instance, of methane and fossil fuel operations to host communities and even the larger region where it operates. But it's just a matter of transmitting and transferring that knowledge so that it be useful to whatever the community is doing, and to better understand the functions, the processes of the operation. Something that we do not see whenever there's a prospective operator or project proponent who comes into the picture. They do not explain what the impacts are. For instance, how much methane will be emitted. There's no such discussion despite the requirement of environmental impact assessment in our own jurisdiction. So we have to do our own research, to do our own study, and that takes time from whatever we're doing. And take note, this is not just something in the realm of advocacy. Our communities are being killed, threatened, incarcerated because of opposition and resistance to projects. For instance, in 2016, one community leader was gunned down in Bataan, that's Central Luzon in the Philippines. In 2018, 8 indigenous peoples were massacred in Mindanao because of opposition to coal mining projects. The Philippines has been ranked as the most dangerous country for land and environmental defenders in Asia. And I think second, third in the world. So we face that threat. And any support coming in, whether that be a campaign movement from outside or the scientific community, will definitely help in better understanding the issues, in helping educate the communities affected, and for us in the campaign movement to further the argument against the expansion of these projects.
Yeah, I also agree with everything that I have said. The local communities, civil society, universities, the institutes of research, they have a huge play to guide the best decisions, decision makers, to guide the best choices, reducing methane with equality and helping this transition to low carbon economy and not letting no one behind. So while trying to elucidate which choices have to make it, this is the biggest participation that this whole has. Example of that is a study that we made for agriculture in Brazil, and we estimated the GHG emissions for Brazil in 2020, and it made some trajectories to 2030. And how the Brazilian emissions is going to get along these next 10 years, and how did this align with the Global Methane Pledge, the Global Paris Agreement. So we tried to measure the solutions that decision makers can take, applying on the farmers, applying on the cities as a politician. So these are huge opportunities to bring development and reduce methane at the same time. So this is the biggest contribution that this part of society, I think they can get to the politicians and decision makers.
Yeah, thank you all. I feel like it is very interesting to hear all of your thoughts about how important, the science is, the data is, and to help inform people about this question and the opportunity to explore. I'd like to maybe follow up on an earlier comment about the broader implication to the local community from in each one of your relevant area. I want to ask what do you think is the most important question the local community cares about when talking about either like a climate mitigation, like energy transition, or like an emission reduction, or the broader context. I heard about like the food security element and also the jobs element. Either is like what's the opportunity or kind of what they cares about to matters the most to the local community when they talk about those issues. So maybe this time we can start with Aaron.
Well, as experience has dictated so far, it always proceeds from an economic standpoint, right? So the question really is, will that bring food on the table? Will that put food on the table? Why should we be concerned? And that is something, while unfortunate, something that we cannot blame on the community. Precisely because there is lack of knowledge sharing, there is lack of information from the industry actors. They just put up their projects, the community does not know. And then when we come in and explain the implications of, for instance, a coal plant or a fossil gas project, there is no interest at the start. But when the question is, when rather it's linked to how will it affect their livelihood? Will it affect their capacity to buy food? Will it affect the crops that they're growing? And then that starts to change. And of course, that becomes the platform for them to start engaging the project. We do not come into the communities to lead. It is the communities leading the struggle. We are just the catalysts so that they better understand the necessity, the urgency of them acting. And without them being able to understand at the outset the implication to their lives, to the day-to-day functions, you won't be able to compel them or even inspire them to act. So that we always proceed from that standpoint, answering the very basic and fundamental question, will that put food on the table? Of course, that's a hard question, but really campaigners are confronted with that in everyday work that we do.
I guess thinking about agriculture sector, when you think of methane, you're thinking loss of energy, right? And loss of resources, money actually. So when you show to the farmers, independent of the scale of the activity, that they are losing money, and they can reduce methane at the same time that they are making more the resources useful in the farm scale, and saving money, get more, and producing the same or even more at another rate, the same product. They can see the difference. They can understand how mitigating methane can bring them to another level of productivity, and customers have access to different markets. And there's this case where, independent of the farmer, they have access to the kind of information, and also have other communities that they already does this. They do it naturally, and that's the biggest part, because they have a local knowledge that they are applying, but not even looking at this as this with this kind of right? They are not seeing through this way, from the climate way, but they do it because naturally. And when we take this kind of action and you can promote in other places, you are actually chasing adaptation for the food systems, for the agriculture, and food especially.
Yes, I think for us, one of the main questions they are asking is, where do we fit, and what is the perception of society about the work we are doing? Because we work with communities who are still facing, like he mentioned, different forms of repressive behavior in the various by the various governments wherever they are operating. So they find it difficult to understand, if their work is that important, why is it that recognition is not coming along? And I think that's where we need to address significantly. We're trying to do this in various countries in Africa, where we are integrating the informal sector into the government offices to ensure that they are all under the same umbrella. I think the other thing is, of course, what they are talking about around finance also, because this is a sector that do not fit into the traditional categories of employment and job creation. So people or national governments hardly factor them into financing mechanisms, and it is sad to say a lot of philanthropic organizations are also not doing that. So it becomes problematic when you want to engage, because nobody really focuses on these groups as far as their financial plans are concerned. So that's one of the main questions. But then I think broadly what we are trying to do is to make sure that we address all these gaps. We stand in as an organization that bridge that gap and support brokering knowledge for these groups to understand whatever data is out there, but at the same time also translate whatever they are producing to put a spotlight, so that the rest of the world understand what community-led initiatives are doing for methane.
Yeah, thank you. That's all very helpful comments to learn about, what the community really care about, and what will be useful angle to attack all the challenges. I think before I open up to the audience, I want to ask, kind of go back to the title of this session, because what we are talking about, scalable solution. And I think network, community collaboration will be a very effective way to scale up efforts. To learn from your experience, your work, can you share maybe a successful experience that you see from maybe one community experiment with really successfully with something, and then that can be shared out with other groups, but also what do you think is the most challenging part about scaling up? Thank you. Yeah, maybe. Well,
Because I have to leave shortly. Thank you. I think, again, you must understand that from our context, these are really energy projects that we want to stop. So when you measure and gauge success, we measure that in terms of how many energy projects in the pipeline have we so far blocked. So this year alone, this year and last year, we've been able to stop 8 fossil gas project expansion in the Philippines. And I think that is because of communities finally understanding their role. Secondly, the communities understanding the issues, understanding the science. And that's hard if you look at it from 10 years ago. But because of the advancement in the campaign, the breadth and the reach of the work that we've been able to do, we have gotten to a point that even at the permitting stage, we are able to use the very laws that the corporations have been using to just get away practically with murder. And I think that is our success story there. And we hope to replicate it across the Philippines, because right now there are 24 fossil gas projects in the pipeline. So imagine the methane emissions that will come from the 24 fossil gas projects in the pipeline. In Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines are the 3 countries where fossil gas expansion has been identified. They're coming into these countries, and they're actively promoting transition from coal to a bridge fuel, which they call LNG, liquefied natural gas, which we actually call fossil gas. And the success comes really from stopping these projects because of the implications in our own survival and the expansion of other emissions, such as methane. On that note, I have to leave. Thank you, thank you.
Well, in agriculture sector, we already have the solutions. We just need to scalable it and we make it useful for everyone. For example, with financing and crediting for the farmers. Bring the data here that can show us the direction where we can go. For example, in Brazil, agriculture is the biggest emitter sector of methane. Agriculture sector in Brazil emits for more than 72% of all methane emissions in Brazil. And Brazil is the 5th largest methane emission of the world, with more than 5.5% of all global emissions. So, but what's inside of those emissions? We have enteric fermentation, waste animal management, management of animal waste, rice, floated, and also burn of residues of sugar cane. But when you look at this enteric fermentation emissions, we have plenty of solutions that can be taken and and cheap. For example, one of that is intensive finishing, where you reduce the cycle of life of the cattle, and you produce the meat, the dairy more early, and you avoid the emissions in the pastures of methane and other GHG gases. So we have also the animal genetic improvements, also the manipulation of human fermentation, and improvement of animal diet, just for one kind of the biggest source of the methane emissions in the sector. We can explore a lot of other solutions that can be taken in different scales and different kind of resources to implement it. So, and this has a whole potential to mitigate methane. But why we're not doing it? What's the problem? Well, it's so easy. Why it's not happening? Because it's very hard sometimes to convince those farmers, especially in Brazil. It's different from local communities. They are open to this kind of solutions. They usually want to hear, or they are already doing it. But when we go to the big farmers, it's very difficult to talk with them. And political desire. If not some kind that can stimulate this kind of practice, financing, crediting, and make it or like science-based targets that the USA has committed to. All of the companies need to have science-based targets to participate for the licitations, right? Without this kind of actions, we cannot promote it. We have to something that is taking the lead for this transition, especially thinking of methane.
Yeah, I think to continue right from where he ended, I think for us, I would say the success stories comes in 2 forms. One in awareness creation, and then the the other in practice. So, like he's saying, it's quite difficult to sort of get people to practice some of the things that we are talking about, right? And the benefit of having locally led initiatives like what we are doing is the fact that it gives the opportunity for knowledge to be built from bottom up. And if I look at our member in Cape Town, our member in Durban, Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, in Ghana, the projects that all of them are doing currently, they are producing a lot of compost. But it didn't just start with diverting all organic waste and producing compost. It started with so much convenience and movement building and producing knowledge among the community members to understand, first of all, what is wrong with sending all your waste to the dump site, and then gradually transitioning into actual practice of now producing compost. Even with that, it took several steps, tweaking formula upon formula. You don't just divert and then you start having compost or having compost that have the nutritional value that farmers would appreciate. So it's been a series of practicing, it's been a series of learning and unlearning. And I think that it gets to a certain point, you can actually say this is a success story, because now you have projects that are at a certain stage that could easily be scaled up with availability of resources. And I think that's the main thing. And then the third thing has to do with the work with the municipalities, because again, when we started, it was more about working as NGOs, working with communities. But then government is on the other side, and then you are working on the other side, and there's difficulty to penetrate. And if you do not work with government, it becomes more difficult, because in Ghana, for example, the government, the municipal assemblies are the sole mandated bodies to manage municipal solid waste. And here we are trying to make sure that we institute sound waste management mechanisms for communities who are under the authority of these government authorities. So it took a while, but now we, starting with the zero waste strategy that we produced last year, we've been able to continuously work with these government officials. And even this COP, one of the government officials, the city officials, is coming to COP to speak a lot more about the project that we are doing with them, and also create more awareness, but also more importantly, draw attention to the fact that investor interest need to also increase in this direction, because it matters a lot. So I think those are actually success stories we can talk about.
Great, thank you. I think we only have a few minutes left. Want to open up to the audience? There are any questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice presentations. My name is Meryl van der Mark. I'm from Synergie Animal. I'm really happy to hear that the IDB is focusing a lot on the role of agriculture. I'd like to hear a bit more about how you're addressing the emissions from livestock, which contributes about 30% of all methane emissions. I've heard some technical fixes, which are not necessarily proven at scale. The use of additives is not proven at scale. I heard the mention of intensification that reduces the intensity of the emissions but not the total emissions. There's a huge risk that intensification of livestock will actually increase emissions. And there have been a number of high-level scientific reports from the IPCC, from IPBES, from Chatham House, from FAO, from many others, that show the urgency of shifting our diets, from shifting away from diets that are very heavy in meat and dairy. So I'd like to hear a bit more about how the IDB is addressing this, and how you're thinking about financial instruments that help farmers and consumers to shift to different diets. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very agricultural question. Yeah, the intensification, as you said, they have a big impact on emissions, or total emissions, but when you see the intensity of the product, like milk, beef cattle, they reduce, because you're producing more all of these products and with less at the same time, like you can say. This rise in the emissions of total, they have a huge impact on the estimations, for example, in the study. but we also considering the how we could make it, how would it be if all of this total production nowadays would be, how good emissions could be if you replace it with this kind of production systems. Because if this transition, also we can see the emissions getting higher along the time because they are producing, we have more beef cattle in the pasture. Not just because you have a cow that's not so efficient as the new one, we're gonna replace it. Yeah, we're gonna have the both at the same time along the same period, emitting methane, for example. In this study, we measured the methane emissions for enteric fermentation with animal management, and for the waste of animal management, we are using biogas, biodigester, and composting systems to get more efficient waste treatment management. For enteric fermentation, we have those four. Like I said, it's finishing, the intensive finishing, the animal genetics improvement, but it's in the whole in this whole toolkit of intensification of the livestock, and the manipulation, as I said, the additives. So they are not so scalable yet. It's not, you cannot put all of our hope on that kind of solution, but we have a lot of, especially in Brazil, a lot of products that you can use it to lower the methane emissions, the rumen of the animals. And it's more natural, like cinnamon, for example. There are studies that using cinnamon a little bit, you can also have some effect to reduce methane emission. And the improvement of diets that has a huge relation with the pastures, because the pastures can remove carbon dioxide. With a better pasture, a lot more food for this kind of production. So with a pasture that is moving more because it's not degraded, we also got a cow, a production that is producing more with a shorter time. But this is a huge problem in the first side, because the intensification that we good, but also emitting more. So that's the other part important for agriculture and a follow sector, that we have to chase these removals sinks, like integrated systems, like NBS solutions, that they are make another part of the way to reduce, mitigate emissions, not just methane, but thinking also in carbon dioxide. This was the first study we pretend to along the years to monitor those methane emissions in Brazil. We have a system that where we are already monitoring the methane for all of sectors to see what's happening with the current policies and the current technology and practice on the field in Brazil. So all based on the national inventory methodology. So it's like an official data, but made for the civil society, and to see which way we are going to the front of this sector.
Well, I hope we have more time to continue the conversation, but I think it's never enough. Let's give another round of applause to all the panelists for both their amazing work and for sharing today. And thank you all for coming. Great.